So let's just jump right in here to discussion information items and the COVID transition.
Thank you, Mr. Smithing. Okay, so we had our third week of students on campus. Unfortunately, this week we were unable to transition to 50% due to the high case numbers, both locally and regionally. Since the start of the school year in August, we've had a total of 16 student cases. 4 of those 16 have been since November 1st, and we've had a total of 6 staff cases since August, and 3 of those were since November 1st. We're averaging approximately 150 to 170 students per day. The idea behind implementing this model second quarter was to begin having students and staff get comfortable being back on campus together and conducting as close as normal to a school day as possible. Our students have done a great job following the procedures that were put in place by our safety committee. Several teachers also are doing an excellent job going above and beyond to try to make this experience as good as it can be for students who choose to come on campus, while also maintaining a similar experience for the students who are following remotely. As expected, I think this will continue to evolve as we implement more weeks of having students coming back on campus and students feel comfortable coming back on campus, and as more students choose to come back on campus. Unfortunately, that being said, I do need to touch on the case data. And Marianne, I'd like for you to pull up the slide with the positivity rates, new cases, and some of that information, please. No, the other slide. Okay, can you scroll down a little bit? Back to the other slide. There you go, scroll down, there you go. Right about there. Okay, so as you can see, this is our first, the case data. The school district uses the IDPH school matrix for determination of community spread, which is updated every Friday. I know I receive some emails from parents. I receive a lot of emails from teachers. Why am I waiting till Friday to make the decision? The data is updated on Fridays, and so that's part of our protocols. We will make the announcements for each week, for the upcoming week on Fridays. The IDP school matrix was updated this past Friday, November 6th. This is our first week in orange with substantial data in all 4 categories. So based on the data that was released Friday, the school district made a mitigating decision not to increase enrollment to 50% for the week of November 9th, this week, as was originally planned. This decision aligns with the guidance published by the Cook County Department of Public Health of lowering your student cohorts when there's an increase in cases or substantial data. If the IDPH data report for this Friday, November 13th, is in orange again with substantial data in the other categories, that would warrant an adaptive pause. IDPH defines it, adaptive pause, as a strategy that allows for a movement in between multiple learning levels to prevent disease transmission during the pandemic. So what does an adaptive pause look for RBHS? If the data comes out on Friday, which I am anticipating based on the daily news reports it will, RBHS would have to take an adaptive pause. That would mean we would go to remote learning for students the week of November 16th. The schedule already has us assigned for remote learning the week of November 3rd for the 2 days that we're in session Thanksgiving week. So we would have technically a 2-week pause, or a 7 school day pause, the 5 of next week and the 2 of the week after. Faculty and staff would still report to the building. The schedule will remain the same. After speaking with teachers, it's important for consistency with the students, so our schedule will remain the same, with Monday's designated remote schedule, and Tuesday through Friday would still follow the same schedule with office hours in the afternoon. Special education families will receive notification from the special ed department on what services will be available on campus. Again, this announcement won't be made until Friday afternoon once the IDPH site is updated. What model will we be using after Thanksgiving? You know, at this point in time, what I would recommend is as soon as the data, should the data begin to go in the right direction, we would always start with a week of 25% to get everybody acclimated to being back on campus and following the rules and procedures in place. And then we could try to implement 2 weeks of 50%. But again, all this is dependent on the matrix and the data. So that announcement won't come out till that Friday or probably that Saturday of Thanksgiving week, but depending on what the availability of the administration is, I coordinate that with them. But really, this is as previously discussed, this is a very fluid situation that we need to take serious, and we need to go 1 week at a time. So the announcement on this Friday will address whether or not we are taking an adaptive pause for the week of November 16th. The board had asked Brendan Curtin, our assistant principal of athletics, to attend tonight's meeting, and Brendan was here tonight to give an update on winter sports. I believe we have 4 scheduled or 5 scheduled?
We have 4 sports scheduled.
Okay, so Brendan, if you want to come forward and just give a brief update on
Can we
the...
talk about this Thanksgiving thing real quick? So what you just said is that we're going to, if the data stays the same, we'll make an announcement this Friday as to whether we'll take the pause, and that's 2 weeks. So that goes to after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's already scheduled to be a virtual week.
Correct, so that'd be 2 weeks of
So
no students on campus. Next week and the 2 days of
What's the
Thanksgiving.
determining factor to whether we bring 50% of the kids back the week after Thanksgiving or 25%?
I think in order for us to move to 50%, we should have all, if not all, a majority of our data points should be in moderate. And so I think there would need to be at least, if we have 2 full weeks in orange, so if we're in orange again this week and orange again next week, we're going to need a week of no orange before we can start transition. So that's why I would like to have our positivity rate and new case rates, both locally and regionally at least, that needs to be out of the substantial category so that we can start bringing students back on campus. And that's why I would say we'd start with 25. I don't see us going where we're at today with the positivity rates and case rates where we're at today. Everything's shifting back to moderate to where we would be able to start right back at 50%.
Because the goal is to get us to 50%. So now, say, and then there's only 3 weeks before Christmas break, correct?
Correct.
So if we could go 1 week, 25, we could go 2 weeks at 50. Yeah,
Data
assuming-
permitting.
Data permitting. So what do we do if the data doesn't show it? How do we start the season with 50% in January?
The season
This is
or the
second
semester? Second
Start
semester?
the second semester, January, 50%. What
Well,
does it
first
take
things
to
first,
do that?
obviously the data would have to be, we would need to be all in moderate. I think that would be the safe way, even if some in transit and minimal transition level. But I would think that it would be good to have at least 1 week of 25% before we go full-blown into 50%. And the only reason for that is just so that there are some kids that change classes second semester. Some teachers will be changing second semester. So it's just like we kind of did that soft opening at the beginning of the second quarter. It gives everybody to go through their schedule one time, meet their teachers, get expectations, and then the second week
That might
we
be
can
the
start.
best time to go 50%, in my opinion. Straight up. I don't
I'd be
choose
here
that.
100%. I mean,
I know, you-
I've worked every day since this pandemic.
So I'm just thinking,
Well, I think
that's my thought, is I want to start 50%, or what if we don't start the first week of school? What if we hold school off a week?
do a remote learning the first week,
No, we just don't do school,
extend the school year.
extend the school year.
We
But
have
if we
not
push the
planned for
whole
that.
thing back 1 week or 2 weeks till we could get kids on campus, what does that look like?
I think some schools have talked about doing a remote week, the first week back from winter break, just to have kids somewhat do almost like self-quarantining. My concern with that philosophy is, I think some families that travel or take extended vacations over winter break may see that as another week of vacation and not necessarily quarantine. So my thought of trying to start the semester coming back at 25% the first week and then jumping right into 50% would be, and that's if all the data is aligned, that would be, I think, an aggressive approach. Obviously, if the data permits and that's something that the board wants, I think what we should do before we even discuss that decision more is let's see where we sit at our December board meeting. If we're dealing with 4 weeks or 5 weeks of a plus 10% positivity rate, that will give us an idea if it's even realistic to be thinking 50% come 2 weeks after winter break.
I mean, we already know sports are going to the 26th of June, right? Okay. Well, I don't want to make a decision now, I just want to have, you know,
Options.
what.
What are our options?
What are our options, what are we, I mean, if we can't go 50%, and we have to add this remote thing, I just don't know. So, that's just where that's, obviously, we've done remote, and we're doing remote, and I'm not, you know, we're doing it, but we're gonna, you know, possibly be doing it in 2 weeks, or next week, right?
We could, as long as that data stays like, if it keeps trending the way it's trending, it's not, I think it's not safe to try to raise population on campus. If anything, we need to take an adaptive pause like the IDPH and the Cook County Department of Public Health recommend.
I mean, we made our I'm not gonna go against the matrix that we developed. I think we should follow that.
So the next month, we should discuss some of those options.
Yes.
And one of those options would be an extended winter break, since we're going to June 26th. I mean, it seems odd that we would have sports for an entire month with students not in the building. Why not take advantage of that and just do almost like a semester, like a college semester break, and come back?
So the logic, if I'm understanding you correctly, it would just be taking a pause and extending winter break, so what, the numbers can get back to all moderate or all minimal, so that we can start off at 50%?
Yeah, I mean, because as long as we're doing sports all the way up to June 26th, I mean, we have significant number of students probably going to be in sports, so why would we race to end in May to have a month of sports if having an extended winter break, kind of like a college semester break, helps us get back to moderate,
I think that's what one of
and then helps us have a more regular second semester? That might not be a bad option.
Monty was talking about more of a college dynamic.
What was that?
I thought I had an email from
So
one of the
what,
teachers.
what one of the teachers was recommending is some of the colleges are giving students off from Thanksgiving till they get back in January. So that they're taking an extended winter break from Thanksgiving through winter break. So we've only been on campus for 3 weeks, so my idea,
So
the
is he saying we
way
should
this
move those
plan.
3 weeks to the end?
Well, the way
That
this
would
was,
work.
the way this was laid out, no, they're doing it remote. All the colleges are doing remote.
I'm just saying.
The way this was planned was we just take this 1 week at a time. So I think right now, we know we're heading towards an adaptive pause, which most likely will happen this Friday, should the data come out as planned. I think we get through our adaptive pause and we see where our numbers are, and we just have to continue to take this week by week. But I understand if in December you want me to explain to you what that would look if we took an extra week at winter break so that we can start off at 50%. My question to you would be, what if those numbers aren't changing after the first week? Then it becomes 4 weeks?
Well, even if we start at 25, I mean, we're going in sports to June 26th. If people graduate in May and then they have to come back to the school for an entire month to finish their senior year of sports, that's odd to me. So I think we should take advantage of June as being in school in June.
Okay. Does the rest of the board feel like that's something you want me to explore for the December meeting? I want to make sure we're getting everybody's opinion.
Well, we're just talking options here,
Correct.
right? What are our options? So, I mean, I think it's good to look at options. I can't tell you right this second, I hadn't thought about this option. So I don't know how I feel about it right this second. I gotta let that sink in a little.
But this is fluid, things change. It changes from-
Absolutely. What was?
We should ask our student reps what they
I'd like
would.
to hear Tom first. I'm kind of going around the table a little bit, and then,
Yeah, I think, options have never hurt anything. I think we should put options on the table. But at the same time, I do think it's extremely important that we take the plan that we laid out and follow it according to the data, wherever that takes us. This is a moment where the numbers are going in the completely wrong direction. It's a sort of a, we're right back to where we were earlier in the year. We don't know where it ends. So I would argue for having a debate about, maybe looking into options. But when I look at the attendance numbers of the last 2 weeks, I mean, the reality is when the community came in front of us and made, passionate pleas both ways, but there were large numbers of people who said, please, let our kids come back to school. The truth is, the data tells us that some of those kids have taken advantage of it, lots of them have not. So I would argue for an approach of steadiness, of making sure, because I've heard multiple feedback points from community members, from teachers, and I think what we need right now more than anything, because we're in the middle of the storm, is that we stick with the plan that we set out. It's very clear. It is what it is. And just so that we don't keep moving the goalpost every time we meet, I think that's very important. So I support the superintendent's recommendation on this. And again, looking at an option has never hurt anything, but I also think we have to tread a little lightly because we're in a bad situation right now, and it's uncomfortable for everyone.
No, I agree. That's why I'm trying to talk 2 months out, right?
Ms. Zalis, would you like to contribute? Are you on mute?
No, not at this time, but thank you.
Okay. Lily?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that the reason that the attendance numbers are so low right now are because kids don't really see a reason as to going in. Because if you go in, the truth is you are one of probably 3 people max in your class, and that doesn't really let them, hang out with their friends, because school, kids want the social aspect as much as they want the learning. And the teachers are still on the Zoom, so there's not much difference. I find it nice being in school because I think it's more productive, but a lot of kids like school for the social aspect, and 25% is just not giving them that when you could be the only student in a class with your teacher and just be alone with them for a whole period. So I do believe that more kids will attend if we ever get to 50%, because that means that there's going to be more students in the building for them to interact with. But I think that extending the school year into the summer is a very bad idea. No student wants that in reality. Even if their sports season goes into the summer, no student wants the school year extended. I'm very confident in that.
I get it. I was in school at one point. I do understand. But no one wants to go. One more day, then even if I had said it June 20th, they wouldn't want to go to June 21st.
Dr. Freitas, you want to add some things?
I do. Good evening, board members, parents, and students, everybody joining us. Guys, students, you're always welcome to your school. I want you here, the board wants you here, the superintendent, the teachers, paraprofessionals, everybody that works at RB wants you here, right? We're allowing up to 25%, where in reality only 12% are coming. I want to see the 25%, so come to your school. For the parents and students, as the superintendent said, okay, this is only week 3 of having up to 25% students back. I'm asking for your continued time and patience as we learn to teach in this global pandemic. Parents and students, I hear you guys. You guys want more days. You guys want more time. You guys want traditional practices. I hear you, and I'm working with my instructional coaches to find out how we can do more. But again, all I ask is for your time and patience. Parents and students, and for some reason you have a disagreement or a conflict with a teacher, guys, talk to them, email them, go to the source first. Because what I found out in my experience in education, usually when you talk to that person that you have a disagreement with and you guys keep it there, it usually works out. But of course, guys, I am always willing to help. Guys, we're learning, right? This is kind of a first year for many of our teachers. We're learning how to do the best we can with 35 minutes per period and allow for class practice and asynchronous learning. But guys, let me tell you what I am seeing in my informal observations and walkthroughs. Many of our teachers are differentiating and engaging students through Zoom and Google Meets. The expectation and charge I've given them, and the one that's most appropriate for this pandemic, is to teach through Zoom. However, our teachers are growing in comfort, and our teachers are going above and beyond. We have teachers in classrooms that are supporting in-person conversation between themselves and students. It's not all exclusively through Zoom. Remember, we have over 114 certified staff members, plus another 30 non-certified staff. We are a pretty big school. Teachers are using the whiteboard, and in-person students are using the whiteboard to illustrate problems. I've seen it with my own eyes. Teachers are leading workouts for both students that are in-person and remote learners. You would think it's a regular physical education class. There are teachers that are building relationships, talking to students about their personalized math, talking to students about their family lives, and about their homework practice. Guys, we are engaging in many of the traditional practices we had prior to COVID-19. Now, could we do better? Of course we could do better. In education, we believe in growth, in improving as we teach, in improving as we revamp our lessons. So I know we still have a long way to go, guys, and I know teachers and students, okay, that we need to differentiate, right, for those students that are in person and remote learning. But remember, guys, we also want to make sure that we're all learning at a safe pace so we can all get the content we need and skills to be successful, not only here, but also in college. Guys, weeks ago, we had a PD led by Bridget Woolman and Kevin Davis that allowed us to learn from one another and share best practices of the tools we're using, the digital tools we're using to engage students, and how to best work with both in-person learners and remote learners. Guys, we're going to continue those practices. That's what the teachers have asked for, and I know that's what students and parents deserve. So guys, just give us time, give us patience. We'll get there, okay? We'll get there.
I think what Dr. Freitas is touching on is why it's important as we take this 1 week at a time, is if anytime I can get back on campus after Thanksgiving for teachers to continue to develop this practice, for more students to try this out, I think that only gives us a better chance of being more successful come second semester. It's not by a lack of effort by the staff or by the administration. I think Dr. Freitas brought up a good point. If parents want to see the go to 2 days a week and 50%, then we need to see more kids coming out for the 25%. We need to see our teachers continuing to work on the lessons they're using to make it interactive. And I think all that's happening. I think this is new for everybody. So I think it's important that we still remember it's 1 week at a time. And also, we still have to, as Mr. Jacobs mentioned, we did lay out a plan on how we were going to bring back students back responsibly. I think it's important that we continue to follow that plan.
Yeah.
And that means going 1 week at a time and just following the data. So.
Well, we need to talk, so next board meeting, we'll definitely talk about how to open second semester, because it's got to look different than it does this week, in my opinion.
And I do think by different, I think we talked a little bit with the staff about the importance of some consistency in using a similar schedule and a similar day for remote, growing how those classroom experiences look and changing some things. I know Dr. Freitas is working with the assistant principal for curriculum instruction, instructional coaches, our instructional tech coordinator. Mr. Davis also is helping out with this, just trying to come up with resources we can use, tech tools we can use to improve the experience for those students that come on campus while still maintaining a good experience for those students that have to stay remote because of a personal condition or a medical condition, family condition, something like that. So we're continuing to work on that, and I know Dr. Freitas is going to be working directly with the instructional coaches and the assistant principal to continue to evolve that, correct?
Yes.
I just have one question for either of you. Are any of our students having to stay home to help with younger siblings? Because the fact is more and more parents are being called back into the office, and the grade school kids are doing a blended learning. So do we know of any of the students who are not coming in because they have to help with a younger sibling?
I don't know if we got that information through our surveys.
No, I could definitely look into that, but that could be a possibility with a family with multiple kids,
it's
sure.
So maybe
for
if we
some.
would want to add that to the questionnaire, because I think more parents are being called back into the office, but the grade school kids are, half day.
So let's say that is the case. How does that help you get to the, what you're asking me to do, getting
Yeah,
to
what is the-
50%?
Well, that would let us know why we're struggling to get to 50%. That would certainly tell us that,
Or currently 25%?
or that would definitely enlighten us that why we're at 25%, because we're not going to leave a second grader all alone at home. I mean, that's a real concern.
I think some of the problems we're not getting is because we're teaching to a Zoom. And there's two
That
kids in
too.
the class, like Lily said, instead of teaching to the kids in the class.
But we-
That too, it'd be good to know.
Let's just take a minute. Brendan, I know I called you up and I'm sorry you're sitting there.
No, he's gonna
I'm glad
talk in a
you're
second.
enjoying this conversation. I know you'll help us through this problem. But let's just take a minute. Let's pretend that we come back in January, or we come back after Thanksgiving, and let's say the data goes all moderate and minimal. We still are in a pandemic. So you're not going to have teachers. You still have to social distance to the greatest extent possible, right? I want to clarify, like when we go 50%, there may be some classrooms where desks are not 6 feet apart. They might be 4 feet apart. But teachers, I can't expect teachers to now go stand shoulder to shoulder with kids. They're still going to want to stay in their teaching area and still social distance, and I'm not asking them to jeopardize their safety while we're still under this pandemic. So even when we say, hey, it's got to look different, it's still going to look different from what I think the board is. It's not going to look like it would on a traditional school year. There is going to still be some video instruction. There's still going to be some asynchronous instruction. There still is going to have to be social distancing. You're not going to be able to come back, if we're still in the pandemic, even though the numbers may go down, you can't come back and do labs and expect kids to be shoulder to shoulder sharing lab equipment, doing a science experience, the next class come in and be using that same equipment, and it's just, we're not there yet. That's not going to happen probably till next year. Now, could more of those teachers, or could those students watch a teacher do an experiment in the class, and the teacher have a webcam on so that those kids are experiencing it and participating through the chat and Zoom, and so the class is a little more directed at the students that are in the classroom while the students at home are still getting a very similar experience? Sure. I think that's like where we're trying to go, and I know teachers are working on that. Like Dr. Freda said, we've been in some classes where some teachers just have the overhead on and they're projecting the Zoom to the overhead, so the kids in class are leading discussions with kids in the class, and the kids on Zoom are doing breakout rooms in the Zoom. I mean, that's, to some reality, that's what we're going to be here until either this thing goes away or until everybody has a vaccine, and even who knows how long
But
that
the
will.
kids at the college are doing labs, so I'm not content to say that we can't do any labs. Maybe we got to look around and see what other people are doing.
Yeah, I don't think kids in the college though are doing labs every 50 minutes with 5-minute passing periods. I don't
So
think they're
maybe we
sanitizing
stagger it,
the
or we got to figure it out. But to say that we can't have any, I don't think is acceptable, because there are other schools doing it, so we got to
And
look
that might be
around.
something that we can visit absolutely second semester during office hours, or during, if there's an asynchronous day, or during the remote day. That might be something that might be possible, but we're on step A, and we got to get, I understand you want me to get to step C, and I'm trying to tell you we're working through that. And so it is going to take some time for everybody. Our teachers are doing a good job trying to fill this gap in and to try new things. And I hear you loud and clear that you want to get it to 50% as soon as possible. And the data permitting, we will work with you to do that. But we have to go 1 week at a time. I think that's important.
And when we get to 50%, I like the idea of streaming the class, teaching to the class.
Yeah, it's not necessarily streaming. I don't want to scare people in that. It's not necessarily streaming. It's just using the Zoom in a different way. If you take a college class, sometimes a lot of these master's and doctorate programs now, where you have 10 kids that are able to go to where the cohort site is, and 1 or 2 are, at another part of the state participating in the doctoral program. So they might be participating via Zoom, and instead of each kid being on their individual laptop, or each grad student being on the individual laptop, they might be the teacher has one camera focusing on the group and one microphone focusing on the group, so that the kids that are or the students that are participating remote are still part of that instruction as it's happening, and still part of those discussions as it's happening. But you're right, it's not earbuds and everybody's on their own individual device.
Right.
So we've talked about some of those examples with our instructional tech people, with Dr. Freitas, and our assistant principal for curriculum instruction, Ms. Lindquist, and they're working on bringing some of those tools to the staff and having some staff that's already doing this help demonstrate that in their departments. So it's a process. I understand.
All right, well, we've got a couple months.
Brendan?
All right, let's talk about sports. Looking no bueno.
Mary Ann, do you have a slide for Brendan?
That's it.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I'm just going to take a few moments to share with you what the landscape of the winter sports season looks like today. As we know, it's fluid and we know that it changes. And as you know, the guidance issued by the IDPH and the Illinois State Board of Education pertains to, but is not limited to, school-based sports, primarily high school and elementary schools. What you see on the screen are the winter sports currently offered by the IHSA. And you'll notice the second column from left has the IDPH risk factor. And you have boys and girls basketball with a higher risk, and then the 5 remaining sports with a lower risk. Again, this was taken from IHSA, so it has boys bowling listed there. We don't currently have a boys bowling team. But where the conflict lies is, the IHSA stating that it's okay for basketball to begin. However, within each risk factor, there are different tiers. There's 4 tiers within each factor, and again, these tiers are utilized by the agencies I listed earlier within the IDPH and the Illinois State Board of Education. So when you look at a high-risk sport like basketball, right now they're in a tier of level 1, which means no contact. If they were to conduct practices as a level 1 high-risk sport, they could practice shooting, defensive positioning, but they can't be within 6 feet of a teammate. They can't have any of that physical contact. So hence the high risk. You have your medium risk sports, which cover more of our spring and summer sports. We're not here to talk about that tonight, but I just want to paint a picture so you got to have an idea of how the risk factors operate. So the medium risk would be soccer, volleyball, water polo. And then you have the lower risk sports that we are set to begin this Monday in competitive cheer, competitive dance, gymnastics, and swimming and diving. So obviously within those, the tiers allow for competition within your COVID zone. For us, it's the suburban Cook County, and or within your conference, which for us would be the Metro Suburban Conference. So that's where things lie right now. I know the IHSA is revisiting the whole landscape of basketball. It seems like an ongoing deal. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the conflict in terms of the IHSA saying we're good to go, we're good to move forward. In speaking with many of the ADs throughout the conference and throughout the state and my personal networks, it doesn't feel like there's many schools that are amping up to play basketball. As a former athlete myself, I would love to see every sport taking off for this winter season, but I just don't know. I think I speak for many ADs saying nothing would surprise me at this point because we've seen so many changes almost on a weekly basis, as Dr. Skinka said earlier, taking it week to week. Because 2 weeks ago, basketball was listed as a medium risk sport, and cheer and dance were listed as high risk sports. So they brought the cheer and dance down to a low risk, and they brought basketball up to a high risk. They did give some input on that, but I think it illustrates how quickly things can change as we move forward. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now for winter sports. We have a winter coaches meeting scheduled for tomorrow, November 16th. Hopefully we're kicking off the 4 low-risk sports, and we're kind of in a holding pattern right now in hopes that the IHSA and the IDPH can align what the expectations are. Again, there's a lot of information out there. Maybe they revisit having basketball to start in mid-December with contests starting in January. Again, it's hopeful right now, but those conversations are out there. I don't know, if the right people are having those conversations at the right table, but they're certainly being thrown out there.
Brendan, today there was an article in the Tribune. Craig Anderson, the director of the IHSA, was quoted that the vote is due tomorrow, but on a general survey, and I know we put down that at this point we're not willing to commit until more becomes clear, especially not with the IDPH and the governor's risk level differentiation, differing from what they originally had as a medium risk. In the article, it says if there's not at least 50% of schools participating, that they would go back to the drawing board. Now, they have a directing board tomorrow, is that correct?
So they have a meeting tomorrow. It hasn't been stated whether this is a review of the data or if they will have an actual vote tomorrow night. I believe they will have an actual vote, but I was in a Zoom meeting with Craig Anderson, and he indicated that he couldn't comment on the time if it was going to be an official board vote at that time, or if it would just be a review of the data. It was also stated that, after that survey had been out for a week, 9% of the schools were looking into participating in basketball at that time. Granted, things may have changed since then. I don't see how at this point, but that's a possibility. But I know that they had hoped to share more information by Thursday, so hopefully they can shed a little more
The
light.
high school superintendents have a weekly Zoom call from the top throughout the state, high school superintendents on Monday. And that was the sentiment that I got from that conversation was less than 10% of high schools have agreed to participate. If anything, more schools have made a hard decision of not to participate. The biggest thing, so the board's aware, a lot of schools, high schools and school districts, both elementary and high schools, belong to cooperatives for insurance, whether it's liability insurance, health insurance, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation. There's different cooperatives, and you have multiple schools. Most of those, the two biggest cooperatives, Skip and Click, has sent a letter to all of their high school districts that basically stated that if they went against the IDPH's risk level and the governor's recommendation, that they would have no liability coverage for any cases or instances that would occur during the basketball season while it was still deemed high risk, and that the governor, if they chose to play. So I think that's one of the things, the increased potential for liability exposure is why a lot of schools have now made the decision to not participate or to back off. Also, that came up in that conversation, there is a lot of discussion that they do think, hopefully, like Brendan mentioned, at some point in time, the IHSA and the governor will be able to get together and come up with some kind of amicable solution, whether that be starting the season later, like Brendan said, or right away at second semester at some point. But I think that's why, as much as some people are looking for a decision on this, I don't think there's a decision to be made. As long as there's this exposure for liability and the uncertainty of where the IDPH, the governor, and the IHSA are all on different places, I don't think it's in the best interest for the board to rush to a decision. I think it's important for us to sit back and see if some of these things get worked out between the powers that be.
Well, some of my frustration, you probably talk about this. So when the Illinois High School Association talked about basketball, they said they had a very successful summer. They had successful camps, low incident of any, outbreaks. And they felt very confident that they could run a successful season. It wasn't until the governor threatened that any schools that went against his standards may face legal ramifications, and he said that was on the radio. He said, well, schools won't go along with then they will face legal ramifications for that. So I have to believe that while I think the Illinois High School Association has done their due diligence and they have really worked through a lot of things, I think we're being held hostage by the state. What happened when our cross country, we had an issue, they went all season, and then our boys couldn't finish out, just finishing protocol. I mean,
Sure.
that happens.
I can
And now all
certainly
of a sudden it's
identify
different
with
for
your
basketball?
frustrations.
If something happens for basketball,
I think
now
one of
there's
the
no.
concerns is obviously the timing is everything. I think with the case rates where they're at currently, that does not help the situation. I also think some of the concern was it's an indoor sport to where the fall was rather successful with the only indoor sport being in the pool. I think there's some heightened risk from the Department of Public Health. Again, like Brendan said, 2-3 weeks ago, cheer and dance were at a higher risk than basketball.
Yeah.
And now that's gone to low risk, and basketball's gone to high risk. So, I mean, this goes back to my point of, I understand you want to see 50%. I understand people want to see basketball. There really is, I don't, from the state down, I mean, there's people, everything is changing on a regular basis. Brendan, do you have anything else to offer with in regards to winter athletics? So we're set for the low-risk sports to have students to have experiences to start on Monday, you said?
Correct. Practices would start on Monday.
And we have safety procedures put in place, pods, all the things we used in the fall, small
All our
cohorts.
guidelines, which are reciprocal of the IDPH, are in place, have been shared with the administrative team, and will be shared out with our coaches. And I've had those discussions with the coaches throughout the past week. So we should be good to go. And to your point, Laura, I share in a lot of your frustrations as well. And I think part of the reason why IHSA made that decision was because the contact days, I think, were successful within a lot of schools. And I think they kind of bounced some of that off that. And obviously that was more conducive for some schools than others, but I think a lot of people were pulling for the IHSA at the time, and now it's a different story. And so, like we said, maybe it's a different set of guidelines and information that we receive next week. So hopefully that's the case.
I think it's the threat from the governor that schools will face legal ramifications.
can't-
I honestly think, because that was what he kept saying over and over last week
Yeah.
on the
I think
radio.
It was a
the-
definite threat of.
Yes.
and
The
he won't
insurance
protect-
liability is the big threat.
And down the line insurance. Right. So what if 100 kids come out for swimming?
Could you repeat that?
What if 100 kids come out for swimming? Because the only
100 kids
sport.
come out for swimming? Yeah, it should pump numbers up.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a special kind of athlete to want to spend all that time in the pool. Hopefully, we do see an uptick in our roster numbers, though.
Brendan,
No
will we
doubt.
still be able to do that safely?
I believe we will. Absolutely. I think we have a great team in place that is
We
very
have two
diligent in
coaches,
how
we
they
have
go
the
about it.
ability to break up
I know.
practices, break
I know
up.
we saw that in the fall with
Right.
you know,
Yeah, I thought we'd
golf
see a little
and
more.
tennis and cross country. All these kids that were playing, you know, soccer or
question.
football or other sports were like, they're still athletes, right?
Right. Yes, coaches will be encouraged to exercise the pods, the breakouts of different groups within their program as they move forward. So
Because I don't think swimming's a cut sport, correct?
that's correct.
That is correct.
Okay. You said you had a question?
I
on this?
do. So for cheer, like it was moved down, and was that with some additional rules put in place? Because when I think about cheer, and I think about the part that's the tumbling part and the part that's similar to the dance part, that's when people on the squad seem to like come together. So
Sure.
are we talking about cheer in it, what I think of as like my middle school, junior high cheer experience?
Sure.
Right, where you're just kind of going through the chants and the moves and not doing the lifts and the tosses and, like, is
Right.
that some of the rules that
So
have been
that's
put in place?
that's part of the IHSA guidelines. I won't go through the entire
No,
set of
no, no, no,
guidelines, but
but-
obviously, no stunts, pyramids, things of that nature where there's personal contact, no sharing of equipment. So if they have props or palms or things like that for their performance, they're unable to do that. There's been a lot of discussion and traction towards having those competitions done remotely or virtually. Could be synchronous or asynchronous, but they may not have to leave Bulldog country to compete in a contest.
Sure, I guess I asked the question because I wanted everyone to understand the reason for the switch. It wasn't just like they said, oh, no, we
Right.
think it's this, right? They put a lot of guidelines in place
No
to
question.
make it be a different level now, right?
Which includes 6 feet of distancing throughout your performance. So,
Okay, thank
we'll
you.
see.
Any other questions for Brendan?
All right.
Thank you, Brendan.
Okay, good
Thank
evening,
you,
everyone.
Brandon, for coming. I know it's kind of last minute, but
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a good night.